Aaron Nagler here, Cheesehead TV, coming to you live on Monday afternoon. 45 days until the NFL draft. 45 days. I can't handle it. That's way too long. They got to move up the draft. Pro days have started. People will start getting new times. Guys who maybe didn't run at the combine will start getting some of those numbers. The CBA talks keep going. I guess the players' date that they have to vote by has been extended, essentially coming right up against a couple days before the start of the legal tampering period. Franchise and transition tags may be in the balance, depending on how that vote goes. Russell Okung is suing the NFLPA, saying that the NFLPA negotiated in bad faith with the NFL. A lot going on for not a whole lot going on, if you know what I mean. Hello, everybody in the comment section. What's up, Nagler? What's up, Timothy? Nags, did they shut down the league? No, Tim, not yet. NFL games with no fans? We'll see. I doubt it. I doubt that would ever happen. Do you think Alan Lazard showed enough last year that he's earned a spot on the team for at least next year, or will he be fighting for a spot on the team during training camp? I think he'll be fighting for playing time, but I think provided he comes back ready to work and has a good offseason and continues to develop, I think his spot is pretty safe, but you're never really sure, and you can't take anything for granted if you're in his position. But 12 loves him. The team trusts him. Coaches love him. Like I said, if he comes back with after a decent offseason, doesn't get complacent, he should be in the mix at least. No doubt about that. RP Max Van Sydow, no doubt. If Jesus came back and saw what was going on in his name, he'd never stop throwing up. One of the greatest line readings ever in cinema history. Do I think Gary will make the team? Yes. Round 2 to 3 is our receiver sweet spot. Yeah, well, it certainly has been in the past. They're in the same kind of spot they were when they drafted Jordy, sitting there at number 30. I would think they would have the opportunity, if they so chose, to drop down, get a few more picks, and then pick a receiver in the second round, because it's a really deep class of wide receivers. So that kind of move would not surprise me at all, which of course would suck for anyone watching the first round of the draft, waiting 4 hours, waiting all night, and then having them drop out of the first round. The fifth-year option, of course, makes it a little bit more difficult, or a little less enticing, so to speak. Having that extra year of control for a player is hard to give up. But that's where teams will probably want to jump up into the late first round for said fifth-year option if they want to get a quarterback. And that might be enough. They might throw enough draft capital at Gutekunst to make him make that move. If Oren Burks is our week 1 starting inside linebacker, can we set up a live chat to all cry together? That is one lack of a vote of confidence for Mr. Burks from one Josh Shenek. If Justin Herbert is available at 22, do you think the Packers will trade up and snag him? No. Would you rather have Green Bay get a tight end in the draft or free agency in the draft? 1,000% in the draft. I don't think they need to spend significant capital at the tight end position. I do think they need to augment it. I do think they could use a complement to Jace and probably Mercedes Lewis if they bring him back, along with Big Bob Tonyan. But I wouldn't use a significant chip to do so, either in free agency or the draft. But that's just me. I am not Brian Gutekunst. I think he will make a run at Austin Hooper. I live in Vegas, and someone asked me if I'm going to the draft. I said, why bother? My team always trades out. Oh, no. Russell Okung filed a complaint for lawsuit against the NFLPA. Alex, I just talked about that. For working in the best interest, for not working in the interest of the best players. Aaron looking on point. Well, I mean, look, I thought Aaron Rodgers made some excellent points. We talked about that on Friday after his radio appearance. I think Russell probably is coming at this from a very reasoned, obviously passionate place. But I don't for a second think that D. Smith and Eric Winston and all involved in the room during the negotiations over the last year were doing so in bad faith. I think that's a bit of a stretch. But I understand, again, why Okung feels as passionately and as strongly as he does, and I can't say I'm surprised by his move today. Oh, Sean, thank you so much for the super chat. Guinness on me. Go Pack Go. That's what I'm talking about. As soon as I'm leaving, as soon as I'm done here, I'll be going and hitting my Guinness. Thank you so much. How can King maximize his potential and continue being a difference maker next season? Jitsu, good question. I would say more than anything, a little more consistency. It's nothing that we haven't talked about throughout his tenure in Green Bay. One nice step he took last year was playing all 16 games. Obviously, an injury bug was an issue. Even, don't forget, this past season, there was a week where he was doubtful to play, got bumped up to questionable, and then ended up playing. The guy clearly fought through stuff, clearly made sure that he was on the field for all 16 games. That level of consistency alone is an improvement. But to your point, clearly a bit of a playmaker, got his hand on a lot of balls this year, led the team on interceptions. I think he can continue to improve in that regard. I think he was targeted a lot because teams tried to, tend to shy away from Jair Alexander. He just needs to level off his play a little bit more, a lot less hills and valleys, more consistency. And I don't know if that's a technique thing. I don't know if that's a film study thing. Maybe he needs to work with coaches on identifying route combinations and or tendencies to try and break off some of that, those, especially that kind of that easy stuff that he allows underneath at times. But for the most part, you saw a guy take a step in 2019. There's no doubt about that. And I think if he continues to develop and takes another step next year, they'll have a really good young player on their hands. Alex, no problem, man. You like the idea of Green Bay targeting a hybrid safety in free agency, possibly a Jaron Curse? I don't know. I think they really liked what they got out of their hybrid guys on hand already, whether it was Chandon Sullivan. Obviously, Raven Green missed the majority of the year, but I loved what they got from him those first couple of weeks. Chandon Sullivan, Ibrahim Campbell. Those are all guys that I think, I understand wanting to go get a hybrid guy like that, but you're just going to push those guys down. Chandon Sullivan in particular, I thought played really well down the stretch. You throw Raven Green back into the mix, I don't think it's really necessary to go use free agency dollars in that regard. But yeah, maybe Gutekunst sees a player who would be able to eliminate the churn at that position, and where they're mixing and matching so much personnel. Maybe there is a guy, maybe Curse is a guy who they can plug in Gutekunst's determination and eliminate all that. Just have the one guy do that kind of third safety position. I tend to think that's Raven Green. They just need to get him back healthy, which presumably he will be when the offseason program begins. Super Edge 99, thanks for the super chat. Whichever wide receiver we draft must start right away? ? No, not necessarily. I get asked this question a lot. Actually, just had this conversation with someone this weekend. Look, whoever they take, whether it's at 30, 60, wherever in the draft, anybody they get in free agency is probably a little bit of a different animal. But in the draft, I wouldn't expect anybody to come in and automatically be the number 2 across from Devontae Adams. I think somewhat is dependent on their skill set. If it's a slot guy, like Jefferson can play in and out, probably the best inside guy if you're talking about Green Bay scheme. But if they got someone like that, what you want is somebody who can contribute right away. Doesn't necessarily have to start right away, but contribute on a consistent basis week in and week out and improve as the year goes on. He doesn't have to be, he doesn't have to come in and just blow the doors off the place, but he does have to come in, learn how they operate on offense, get on the same page with Aaron Rodgers, and then continue to improve week in and week out throughout the season. I think that's a reasonable expectation. I do think it's a bit unreasonable to expect a guy, especially down there at 30, to come or beyond, to come in and be a day one starter at wide receiver in the NFL, when a lot of these guys, not all of them, but a lot of them go from playing in offenses where they're asked to run 5-6 different routes to having 5 or 6 different options on each and every play out of 100 routes. How they're supposed to read a defense, reading defenses on the fly, and then making sure they're reading them just like the quarterback is. And oh, by the way, if you don't do that, you're not going to play. That's a lot to put on a rookie's plate. And that's not to say they can't do it. It's not to say it's never going to happen, but I wouldn't expect it. That's just me. I've seen a lot of mocks that even have Murray, that do not even have Murray in the first. How is that even possible? I think it's a beauty in the eye of the beholder, right? I mean, if he were a more complete player, he'd be probably a consensus top 15 pick. But he does have some limitations when it comes to his physicality, when the inside lineman getting up on him. I wouldn't go so far to say as he struggled with that, but that is definitely not a strong point of his game. And maybe some personnel groups, maybe some media evaluators determine, that's just too big a demerit for me to put him in the first round. Now, I couch all of that in reminding you that what we see in mock drafts and in the media has no bearing or representation of what's going on inside either 1265 Lombardi or in buildings around the league. Personnel groups very much keep their own counsel. They do not pay attention to the mock stuff. Now, that's not to say they might not have similar boards or similar ideas, thinkings, ideas about needs, etc. But Kenneth Murray could be a top 15 pick on somebody's board for all we know. Hey, and for all those of you who know what a draft crush I have on Kenneth Murray, I would like to announce that I found out, or I figured out, I saw this weekend that he is now following me on Twitter. So Kenneth, shout out. I hope you're in green and gold on April 23rd. Any chance we can go with a cornerback in the first round? If so, who? I have no idea who that might be. I know there have been a few names thrown around in the top kind of 10. There's even been a couple mentions of the top 5, but I haven't really looked at corners at 30. I will endeavor to do so this week. Joe, thanks for the super chat. Do you think they should consider getting a new QB1? Rodgers hasn't been cutting it lately. No, I do not think they should get a new quarterback. I think Aaron Rodgers is set to play for another 4 years, maybe 5 years. His contract's for another 3. No, Aaron Rodgers is still one of the best in the business. And they certainly could possibly draft his successor. But I think we're going to see a guy who maybe isn't the Aaron Rodgers of old in 2020, but he is going to be an improved version of what we saw in 2019. And I think giving him a few more weapons, a continued emphasis on the ground game is going to really open up his game. I think a bigger emphasis is going to be placed on play action. We're going to see a bit less of the spread stuff. And all you have to do is look at the numbers. The splits between his play action versus non-play action last year are crazy. He was so successful with play action, and I think that's only going to continue. They're going to lean into it even more. And as they do, his numbers are going to improve. And look, even his numbers last year aren't terrible. They're just not like Star Wars Aaron Rodgers version numbers that we're used to. But no. Aaron Rodgers is not, nor should not, go anywhere. Draft won't fix game plan on D. Well, you got that right, William. It is still the same scheme. My only caveat there, or kind of pushback there, is I thought Mike Pettin did a really good job as the year went on of shoring up his run defense. It's no secret. After week 3, they started getting gashed week in and week out for about 3 or 4 weeks. And then I want to say like around 6 or 7, he really put it together. And they played much better run defense throughout kind of the second half of the season. Obviously, it all fell apart on them in the NFC Championship game. But I wouldn't be so quick to dismiss his ability to adjust and or make the necessary adjustments in the running game. When will contracts like Irvin, Big Dog get done? Ryan, I have to think they're waiting on the CBA. Gutekunst did talk about that at the Combine, and I do think that's holding up a lot of these things. And it's not necessarily the only sticking point. I'm sure there are deadline spur action, and there's no real deadline yet. But like the Jimmy Graham move hasn't been made official, but it's been reported. I think we will start to see stuff as we get closer to the legal tampering period, which is March 16th. So 10 days or so. George, thanks for the super chat. Could Easton QB Washington 6'5", yay or nay? He is raw, but sitting behind Aaron for a while could do him some good. I mean, George, thanks for the super chat. He's got a rocket of an arm. There's no doubt about that. I don't love him as a prospect, but I think after you get past the kind of top 2 or 3 guys, that's usually the case in the draft. I don't hate the idea. I do wonder where you'd pick him. I don't love him at 30, but do you wait till 60? Maybe there. But look, all it takes is Brian Gutekunst falling in love with the guy to make that happen. I think, they were set to take a quarterback last year that he really liked. Denver jumped up in front of him and got him. So that was in the second round. So if there's a second round guy there that Gutekunst loves, I have little doubt that he'll take him. Do I think Blake Martinez will actually get $10 million per year? I do. I 100% do. There are lots of teams with lots of cap space and inside backer who's incredibly productive, despite maybe his limitations both in coverage and making tackles at the line of scrimmage rather than 5 yards downfield. He will get paid. The market has certainly been exploded the last year and a half, and I think he will reap those benefits. You said before that soon the Packers will have to make a decision if they want to pay Aaron Jones or not. What are the reasons that would make them not want to pay him? Seems like a no-brainer to me. Well, Gretchen, ultimately about cost, and a lot of that would depend on what kind of deal Jones was seeking. Running backs traditionally, especially of recent ilk, have not fared well once they've gotten paid, and or teams have not fared well by paying running backs. Now, a lot of those deals, the ones that people would point to when they say running backs don't matter, you shouldn't pay running backs, are the superstar ilk like Gurley or Ezekiel Elliott, etc. I think if they can get Aaron Jones done for a little bit more than what the Chargers gave their back, whose name escapes me at the moment, I think they could probably get that done. And certainly all the reporting coming out of the combine saying that Aaron Jones representatives and the Packers met in Indianapolis and that there's interest on both sides getting a deal done. That to me would indicate that Jones's representatives know the ballpark figure of what the Packers could deem tenable. But there's some risk there. Aaron Jones is great. They found him in the 6th round. What's not to say that they can't find another couple backs in the 3rd day of the draft? And that's not to say that they can just snap their fingers and do it, but they did find him in the 6th round. And there are tons of productive backs coming into the league each and every year. If you were a very shrewd / cold calculated whatever as far as a GM goes, and you wanted to go that route, you could very easily say, all right, thank you for your service, 4 years, on to the next running back, because they have a very short shelf life. This is the first time Aaron's ever played 16 games in a season. Who's to say he's going to do that again? Rather than pay him, he's going to get a nice little bump in salary from the pay escalation bonus that he gets. The salary, I think, goes from like $700,000 to roughly $2 million this year. Let him play on that, and then let him hit the market, bid him adieu, and then draft a new running back. That would be one way to go about it. I wouldn't do that because I think Aaron Jones is very special and or makes the Packers offense go in a way no one else does. But I get the thinking for let him walk, draft a new guy. I've heard owners are hoping players say no to the CBA so they can later push for an 18-game season down the road. Do you think there's any truth to that? Yes and no, Frank. Let me remind everyone something that I say every couple days during CBA reportage, seemingly. I certainly said it a lot last time around. The last CBA was being negotiated. Every time you read something, good or bad, for one side or the other, you're reading it because someone wanted you to. Now, I have little doubt that there is somewhere an owner, maybe owners, who are hoping that the players vote no, and then they get back to the negotiating table and the owners say, well, now we want 18 games, take it or leave it. And if you don't want it, we'll lock you out after the final league year, which is 2020. That's entirely possible. Part of the reason we know that, though, is because they did leak it and let it be known so that players would hear that and go, oh, boy, I don't want to deal with 18 games. I better vote yes. Now, is it feeble? Yeah. Is it kind of silly? Of course it is. But do not put it below ownership or anybody on either side to take every advantage and or chance to kind of PR massage their version of things. You've seen a couple of the NFL media reporters today talking about, they had another meeting of labor leaders and why weren't vocal guys like Aaron Rodgers or Russell Okung in that meeting? That's very much the league trying to sow division. It's pretty transparent, but it's something to remember. We only know these things because somebody wants us to know them. How am I doing, brother man? Jake, I'm doing all right. Had a bit of a rough weekend, and my kids are really sick right now. 2 of them are at home puking, so that's on my mind a little bit. But other than that, I'm okay. If they reduce testing for weed, will Z still get in trouble? Yes, because his arrest happened while he was playing under what would then be the former CBA, but those rules would still apply. I will not be surprised. I won't be surprised either way, but I will not be surprised if he gets a game suspension from that. With so many free agent quarterbacks, does that give the Packers the upper hand in the first wave of free agency? I don't really think so, Thomas. I mean, I get what you're saying because a lot of those dominoes have to fall and cap space is going to be used up, and quarterback is a premium position, so you have to think some of those cap dollars are going to be put into that position. But I don't think they were ever going to be big buyers early on. And teams that want to, attack positions where the Packers have similar needs are still going to go that route. I don't think it's not like the draft, right? Where you got maybe 5 quarterbacks going to be drafted in the first round, maybe 4. Those guys will push down defensive talent to the Packers. We've seen that before. I don't really think that plays out in free agency, but it might. It is a different year this year. You are right in the sense that there are a ton of quarterbacks. There's a lot of quarterback uncertainty at the moment, which is kind of rare for this time of year. All right, buddy, I'm going to have to get going. I can't thank you guys enough for all the questions. Please hit like, hit subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family. GSET TV, we're devoted to Green Bay Packers fans worldwide. Oh, and hey, if you want to, even consider supporting us beyond hitting like on a video, please consider giving us $5 a month on our Patreon, patreon.com/GSET-TV. It supports everything we do, and you get exclusive access to my podcast, which I'll be recording the next installment tonight with Andrew Brandt, former Packers executive. We'll be talking about, obviously, a lot of the collective bargaining stuff, maybe some draft stuff from his time with the team, talk about Aaron Rodgers, etc. So if you're on Patreon, expect that overnight. Hit like, hit subscribe. Have a great night, everyone. Go Pack Go.